Hello, my name is Brendan Decora, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, Pro Audio Profiles. Here, I'm going to interview recording engineers, mixers, producers, and others in the pro audio field. Together, we're going to learn how you can make amazing records that can give your listeners goosebumps. Welcome to the show. On today's show, we have Phillip Broussard. He's worked with Rubin for a long time and has credits with the Chili Peppers, Tommy Stinson, and Jake Bugg. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. It's cool to be here in your studio with you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Nice. So I want to start with a little bit of your background. If you could go through, just summarize how you got to where you are.
Sure. I guess it goes back to my days in college. I started working at a little regional studio in Austin, where I was going to college at the time. And I actually worked for two of them there. One was run by a TV producer who was working on regional talent in Hyde Park. And then that took me to another studio, which was on the other side of town. But another studio that was working with regional talent as well. And this is the early 90s, mind you.
Okay.
And we're still obviously working in analog. ADAT is shortly coming out, or if not rolling out at that time.
Fun times.
So much fun. Everyone loves locking up ADATs.
Yeah.
And then they were also doing some label work for a couple of blues labels in the region, southern or western Louisiana and eastern Texas. And they had done a few bigger projects, Christopher Cross, Timbuk3, Eric Johnson, and the like. So I was lucky enough to kind of parlay another internship, as you would.
Right.
Parlay an internship there. And I met a couple of guys, Jim Watts and Ethan Allen. We were going to college together at the same time, working at studios, working in restaurants. And that eventually got me, with relationship of those guys, helped me become sort of the engineer that I am now, with the idea of learning signal flow, learning how to plug in microphones, session flow.
So you never went to school at all? You just started
working in studios.
Cool.
Yeah, I was a fine art major in college.
Okay.
But I had a big background in electronics equipment. I was always the guy that had stereo systems and reel-to-reel decks and turntables, and I was always playing around, experimenting with that stuff. So I had this knack. It was always around my childhood with my parents and stuff. And that was something that I was always interested in, but I didn't. In your early 20s, I had no idea what I was going to do. Still trying to figure that out. But luckily, it got me into studios, and I started. Cool. I was started in Austin, and then it eventually took me to New Orleans.
Yeah,
at a bigger studio, like a real proper studio. Nice. Major label projects were being done there.
Okay,
and it was for. Daniel Lanois was the owner of the studio, and it was previously his private sort of studio where he was doing his own projects.
Right.
And then I think he took them took projects on the road and would tour.
Okay.
And then
book it out in the meantime.
Exactly. He was able to figure out, I guess these people are kind of trustworthy. They're going to pay me some money.
Right.
It eventually kind of turned into a little business for him.
Right.
And I came in much later.
Nice.
After that. So great studio there. And that's when I really learned like real major recording on analog consoles, analog tape machines, bunch of old vintage microphones and compression and EQs. We had API, Neves, Studers, all of the kind of textbook examples.
Right.
And
did you work with Daniel at all? Or?
I did not.
Really?
No, not on any projects per se. He would pop in and would come and stay, and he was doing other things in town that maybe were more business oriented, some music oriented, but he wasn't doing records there or projects there when I was there.
Gotcha.
But I did develop a rapport with him, and he was always very much a mentor in a lot of ways, that he would pull us aside and talk to us about calibration, alignment, techniques, editing, listening, how to listen.
Nice.
It's one thing if you're hearing just a lot of stuff going on, but
right.
what are you listening for? That was always a little helpful, hearing it from someone who's been around to sort of, guide you and hone in something like that. Yeah.
So what happened after New Orleans?
New Orleans, he put it up on the market to sell. I don't think he wanted to be in the commercial studio business.
Right.
And it ended up bringing me to California. It was going to be closing. And there was a while there where, like, every session we did, it was going to be like the last session. This is the last session. It went on for a while. Went on for a while.
Yeah.
And gear was kind of slowly making its way to the West Coast, because he had a facility in Oxnard.
Okay.
In an old movie theater that he had converted into a studio. And eventually, I was going to have to make the move either to New York or LA.
Right.
I'd never been to either one. I'd been to New York once a few years before, but it was still outrageously expensive then.
Yeah.
And so I was going to have to make a decision if I wanted to keep working at, the caliber of clients and labels and budgets and stuff. So I made the trek to California.
Cool.
And got a job over the fax machine with a friend of mine was working. He was going to a recording school here, Ben Mumphrey, and he's going to a recording school. He was working at a studio called O. Henry in Burbank. And he was like, send me your resume, put my resume in front of the studio manager. Studio manager called and said, this looks great, but I hear you live in New Orleans and you may be moving to California.
Right.
I moved, and I said, yeah, if I get a job, I will for sure move.
Right.
And I did.
Cool.
And I drove straight to, a couple days later, 2-3 days later, I drove straight to O. Henry to meet them and see the facility.
Cool.
And then that's what got me here. So it got me to California.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was interesting. It was fun.
Yeah. Right. And then from there, I know we met many, many years ago at a place called the Steakhouse.
Yeah.
And that was when I remember you had hooked up with Rick Rubin in that whole camp at that time.
That's
Can you
right.
tell me a little bit about that camp and what that was like?
Yeah, it was amazing. And it still is amazing.
Yeah.
What can I say? Yeah, we met at the Steakhouse.
Which is a studio. It's not a steakhouse. Right. I remember getting phone calls like, what's on your menu tonight? Like, no.
We weren't taking reservations, that's for sure. How funny is that, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know the story of why they called it that. To this
so
day,
strange.
I still don't.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's a great facility. 2 EMI Neve consoles put together.
Yeah.
Phenomenal sounding console. Great room, great live room. Killer staff. So let's see. So I started working there. I'd done a little stint at Sound City after my O. Henry days.
Okay.
I ended up going to Teatro for working there. O. Henry kind of ran its course. I went to Teatro, did a thing there, and started did a bunch of studio installs and decommissioning studios and kind of setting up for making records. Right. Took me to Sound City. I was there for almost 2 years, and then I jumped ship.
Okay.
And I ended up doing some tech stuff for a minute and doing more studio installs with Mark Howard from Dan's camp, and then brought me to Steakhouse where you and I crossed paths. And it was there that I ended up meeting Rick and Greg Fiddleman and Dave Sardi and Greg Gordon and Schiffman. I think I might have worked with Schiffman at Sound City, I think.
For sure.
And a crew of folks who were very busy, amazing teachers, mentors, whatever you want to call them. I learned a a hell of a lot of recording and technique from all of those people.
What were some of the projects that you guys worked on? I mean, I know you're still working with that camp, but
yeah,
just list off just a couple
of during the steakhouse days.
No,
or,
with Rick.
With Rick. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Geez, Linkin Park, System of a Down.
Nice. Which System of a Down record? Really? You worked on them?
Yeah, we did 2 records in the same session. We did Hypnotize and Mesmerize.
Okay.
All in the same session.
Nice. I didn't know you worked on that. That's
cool.
We
did it up at the Houdini Mansion.
Okay.
It was a studio install.
Right.
And they had a lot of songs written, and then there was a lot of writing that happened to this. I don't know if they intended it to be a double album or 2 single records. I don't know if that was the goal.
Right.
But we certainly had enough material, and obviously it came released that way.
Yeah. Nice.
But Chili Peppers,
of course.
4, I think I did my 5th Chili Pepper record, I think, over COVID.
Just now, yeah.
What else, man? Dixie Chicks, Adele.
Okay.
Which is a big one. Jay-Z.
Right. Yeah, it always surprises me the variety of clients that Rick works with.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what?
Yeah. And I did one record that I really loved. It's called Devotional Music by this guy named Krishna Das.
Okay.
He sings in Sanskrit.
Oh, wow.
Where are you doing records in Sanskrit?
That's crazy.
You're not.
Nice.
It was amazing, but really super vibey and very meditative and almost droney to a lot of.
Right.
Very spiritual. It was really quite amazing.
Nice.
But yeah, so the gamut of what Rick's working on is that swath is pretty wide.
And obviously you're doing stuff on your own, producing and engineering records, your own projects now. What are some of the recent things that you've worked on?
Some of them I can't talk about.
Of course.
But because they're still being worked on and will come out sometime in the near future. Chili Peppers, we did over lockdown.
Right.
We did 10 months out at Shangri-La.
Okay.
And that was an interesting time because COVID was really kind of at an all-time high.
Right.
We were getting tested every week.
Oh, geez.
And that was a weird time. But we just kind of focused on the work and did that. So so I did that over lockdown. I did another thing, like I said, 2 other things that I can't really speak of. And then since then, we've kind of come back out of that world. I do some archiving part-time as well for a couple clients. And I'm usually transferring old tapes of some sort, or I'm taking an old Pro Tools session from like Sound Designer 2 files and bringing them up to Wave. I have an old rig that I do that too.
Right.
And then I also do, done some mixing. I just recently worked with a band, synth dark wave kind of band out of Texas called Night Drive.
Nice.
We did a 5-song EP that was really cool, really fun.
Right.
We're about to embark on another one.
Okay.
And then...
and you're only mixing that?
I'm only mixing that at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you engineer and produce as well? Or?
I do. It's been a minute since I've produced something.
Okay.
But a lot of engineering, a lot of mixing. My producing goes back a couple of years when I was... Tommy Stinson and I did a couple of records together that I produced with him. And then... mostly it's just been a lot of engineering.
Cool.
And I do, some really... kooky stuff too.
Oh, good.
Out in the forest.
We all do.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. So one thing I like to talk about on the show is, just how to get the best performances out of your clients and inspire people to, perform their best. When you're engineering and you're preparing for a session, what are some of the considerations you take for that?
Well, it's always helpful if I'm just engineering, it's helpful to know the material, to kind of know what, is it a songwriter? Is it a metal band? Obviously, that's super helpful. And then I start prepping based on what I find out with that kind of information. And I'll try and do some research and figure out what gear they've used in the past, what microphone chains are they using for vocals, guitars, whatever, drums, whatever. I mean, it's helpful for a band to walk in and feel at home with familiar looking equipment.
Of course.
But if I'm producing, then we have conversations with the artist about what sound they're going for,
Right.
what their vibe may be, what do they want to achieve, what do they want to stay away from.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll usually have conversations, if not some listening parties, where we can listen to their music in the past, maybe what they don't want to redo or revisit, and then maybe some reference of something that they want to do based on current music or something that they like. It doesn't even have to be current. They might like something from someone else and like, how can we achieve this vibe or this sound or, scale back arrangement or add more, and so for me, it's about just sort of research and then a lot of conversations and back and forth.
Right.
So we can kind of come together with a game plan.
Nice. And like, obviously when you're a producer, you have more control over, discussing the artist's, broader vision and that kind of stuff. But when you're engineering, do you work with the producer or do you work with the artist, or how do you figure out what kind of sonic picture to craft?
It depends. It depends. If it's a producer, then obviously he and I are having or she and I, that person and I may be having that conversation of what their goal may be, and I may not really be dealing with the artist. Maybe just sort of strictly with them, and they've got a vision and they've got a goal, and them and the artist have figured that out, and I'm there to sort of facilitate and just make sure mics are working, make sure everything is copacetic so we can just kind of fly. If I'm with the artist, then I am definitely talking with them and figuring out what our goals are. Are we doing an album? Are we doing an EP? Couple songs, and then figure out what my role is. Producing means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yes, that's true.
Good, bad, or otherwise, that's a different conversation. But I'm not really, I'm not just I'm not a beat maker.
Of course.
I'm kind of, I see myself as an older school kind of producer where, if I need to make beats or make something, I will. But it's more of the old school style of kind of, let's go through the songs. Let's make sure, this is what we want to do. Songs kind of, even in the demo stage, you can kind of tell which batch of songs fit together and maybe the ones that don't. Maybe some of them are more finished. Maybe some of them are not. And certainly as you start recording them, the songs really take on a life of their own. And maybe a song that you thought was a throwaway might be the one everyone's most excited about, right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
So we'll have those conversations about what we're trying to do, and then we can talk about tempo, key, like I said, batching or grouping of songs and how they fit with one another to make it a bit of a cohesive work, and whatever we may do to facilitate that. Whatever the best way is. Do we track it as a live band?
Right.
Is it a one-off piecemeal kind of thing? Click track in a rhythm section, or the demo, and a rhythm section playing on top of the demo, or whatever we're doing.
Right.
It's kind of there's no rules, anymore. It seems like everyone has their own way.
Yeah.
And which I think is also cool because it certainly breaks it up from something else. But
so that actually brings me to the next question, where I wanted to talk about working in different environments. You mentioned you spent time actually helping build studios and outfit studios and stuff like that. How do you what do you take into consideration when you have to go to like a smaller studio, even a place that's built out in a house or something that's like that? What do you think about when you walk in?
Yeah, that playing field is very unlevel.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, monitoring is the thing that we've got to get dialed in for the most part. We've got to be able to hear and listen accurately to make, proper decisions. It's ground control, but also environment. I love different environments, from studio installs to straight up, studios built from the ground up, East, West, Sunset,
right.
United. I love those as well. But I think, it depends. I'm a little indifferent about like what we need as opposed to, or what I want as opposed to what we need. Let me put it that way.
Right.
Because if we don't need a Neve 8068 just to do vocals or something else, then we don't need that. But for me, I think monitoring is super helpful, and I have speakers I can bring if they're not available. And then whatever our goals are will kind of dictate what we need, how many microphones, what caliber of microphones we need, amplifiers or pedals or outboard gear. I'm indifferent as long as it inspires the artist and us to be working to get great work done. I'm down. I'm all about it,
And that's part of it too is, sometimes when an artist works in a studio that's built out of a house or a retreat place or something that's not a professional commercial place, it's like some of the pressure is relieved a little bit, because they're not looking at the clock. They're not worried about that, kind of thing. They can relax and, get into it a lot more.
It is. That's very true. Especially if I may go back for a sec, like when I talk about Kingsway back in the New Orleans days, it was an old 3-story mansion that had a studio built in on the ground floor. I say built in. Actually, equipment was just sort of brought in and installed.
Right.
It wasn't like we had panels and clouds, and it was none of that.
Right.
That was the vibe that, it was like we're in this old mansion from 1860. This is a vibe all on its own.
Right.
Let's make a record here, or several records as it eventually became. But like I said, there was no attitudes of trying to change or, adapt that into a studio. That was the vibe.
Right.
And, it was also set up in a situation where artists or bands lived there.
Okay.
On the second, or it was 3 stories, so on the second or third floor, depending how many folks you had or, what have you. But we had, it was a big kitchen and dining room and ballroom, and we had a big grand piano and anyhow, a 40 input console. And, but we would work, and there was Persian rugs on the floor and mirrors, and you weren't in a studio per se. You were in a creative vibe that very much was inspiring, and you wanted to be in there. It was hard for people to go to bed. They were
hard on the engineer.
Yeah, we worked long hours because of it, because there was no clock, or there was no something weighing over someone's head on, we got to wrap up because we're going to get into overtime. That was never a deal.
And the Rick's Houdini house, was that similar vibe, or what was the deal with that?
For sure, it absolutely was. Okay. And now that's a situation slightly different in the aspect that Rick owned the house, and we brought in all of the equipment, and then once the record was done, we loaded the equipment out.
Oh, really? It wasn't permanently set up as a studio.
It was not a permanent setup.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's right. It was a permanent temporary setup. Yeah, but it was the same kind of thing.
Because there was a lot of records done there. Why didn't you just outfit it and leave it?
Because it was a house that was unoccupied, and there might be a weekend between a record. I remember going from, I think it was the Hours, to the Chili Peppers with like a 48-hour turnaround, like loading out and then loading them in and going right into Stadium Arcadium. And I had been working on the Hours for, I think, 2 months, possibly 3. I was working mostly all nights.
They switched out all the gear?
No, the gear all stayed the same, but the band loaded out their gear, and then the other band loaded theirs in. But that was the only time where they were sort of bookended almost back to back. Other times there might be a month or 2 months or even 3 months or longer between. It would have been lovely to have not torn that stuff out so often, but it just was, that's scheduling and bands and tour cycling and everything. So record cycling and everything as well. So it was just very different. But yeah, there was no staffing there at the Houdini place.
Okay.
No security, or lack of a better term.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a security team or so forth. There usually were when somebody was there.
Of course.
When the band was there, they would bring in security, or we would hire security on premise, because we had a lot of equipment up there, and not to mention intellectual property with hard drives and tapes and things of that nature. And that's a pretty well-known spot in LA. If you've people that are music fans and fans of bands that have worked there over the years, it's still a spot people drive down and will try and pull over and walk up.
Yeah,
and
you can see it right off the road when
you're
driving down Laurel Canyon.
If you know what to look for, it's not hidden.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't own it anymore, but
that's correct.
It's was the gear all rented, or
it wasn't?
Oh,
the gear was all rented. We got it from Ocean Way
sense.
Studio, had a rental division called Classic Studio Rentals.
Right.
And we got it all from them.
I see. So he just rented it on a per project basis.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought that it was like, all the gear was his, and like, why would you take it out?
Yeah.
Because so many things are done there,
I mean, that I would have, I had kind of suggested that at one point, because I was kind of the guy that was a fixture there.
Right.
It was really me and whoever was brought in.
Right.
And I worked a lot there over the years, and even I loaded in several projects that I actually wasn't. I would be a consultant on something.
Okay.
But I was there to load them in and kind of get them set up and get them going.
Right.
And then also there for load out, and tear down and sort of things. But in addition to, I don't know how many records I made there, 8 or 10, maybe 11. There over the years, but there were people who wanted to rent it, and do photo shoots and film shoots and video shoots.
So in between the records, he would rent it out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And he had, he had obviously first call on what he was doing and when to rent it and when not, depending on who may or may not be coming in. But, and I had sort of suggested, like, is there a way that we could just, it's not my money, so it's very easy for me to go to the office and say, can't we just leave the Neve there?
Right.
and all of the gear and I could probably bring in some sessions, in between the bigger records and so forth. But that wasn't, I think in hindsight, if financially speaking, maybe that would be something more viable now.
Right.
But I also think in turn, Rick, I'm not speaking for him on any stretch of the word, because now he owns Shangri-La.
Right.
But I think at the time, I don't think he was interested in having a commercial or let alone a studio. Right. Now, he had a studio in the bottom floor of his house, and I worked in there a lot, and a lot of us worked in there a lot. But I don't think that was something he was interested in, was like running a business. It was just really for his projects. And
And it was all part of the project budget for the rentals and everything. So it was a package deal.
And he had comfortability, and not only that, they were private.
Right.
And a lot of for up until we were done with Chili, even when Chili Peppers was done, like, I'm not really at liberty to talk about,
of course,
any of that stuff. Yeah. And
so when you were setting up the place, like, was it different setups? Were you trying to, were you working with anyone to help, from the artist perspective to kind of maximize the setup, or
the setup changed regarding consoles, how many inputs we needed. Obviously, a smaller input console is cheaper than a larger input console.
Of course.
Slipknot has 9 guys in the band.
Yeah.
And we want to track live.
Yeah.
That's different from the Mars Volta, who at the time was really a 4-piece. And depending on what you're trying to do.
And so when you're setting up for different projects like that, like, how do you, keep in mind from the artist perspective, like the layout of the room so everyone can see each other? Like, how do you make sure that they're comfortable in the room?
That is we have to have a conversation with the band when they show up.
Right.
I mean, we have a pretty good idea because we've done it a number of times, but always the principal person in the band, if not the bass player, if that's not the principal, wants to see the drummer.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
these guys need to have eyesight with everyone. Percussion could probably be in a different room without great eyesight.
Right.
And I mean percussion like not a main drummer, like a more percussive part, because they can listen to what's happening in the headphones and know the tunes. But most likely in a live tracking setting, it's mainly going to be the principals looking at one another so that they're all cueing. And it also depends how well the arrangements are dialed in. Are they finished and everyone knows that it's always going to end here, or is there room for growth and interpretation? And we're going to spread out a little bit. And I have to say, most of those sessions up there, we weren't up there to get in and out in like 2 weeks to turn out a record and get out of there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of writing going on. And that's why a lot of those records took as long as they did. There would be a group or a batch of songs, whatever number that may be, and we would work on them, but they also had ideas, and we would stretch them out. Right. And then writing sort of happened, and then we would take those to the level to record them.
So then when you're producing or, working with a band, what are some of the things you do in regards to pre-production and writing and that kind of things?
Yeah. Writing, I love. I love doing that because you never really know how things are going to turn out, right? You experiment and throw things on the wall to see what sticks. And you can see and feel the artist getting excited and getting into it. And that in turn brings excitement and more ideas. I love those.
Of course.
And then when you have songs that are pretty well structured, you examine them, and get in it. For pre-production, I don't know anyone that's ever failed from doing pre-production. Everyone always wins, right? It's sometimes tricky to get somebody to do pre-production if they haven't done it before, or they don't like doing it. Maybe they're burnt or they're tired of the music, but it helps to bring in a fresh idea of doing it and examining what's going on in the rhythm section, melodically, tightening things up. Is it the right tempo? Could it be faster, slower? You examine those things. I love doing pre-production, but also, if it's just a guy, if it's a songwriter guy, and you're going to bring in studio cats, can't really do pre-production. You can work with the artist and do a great demo, and you and the artist are banging it out, making sure the transitions are tight. That it's that it could be done on their own as the troubadour, so to speak. Then you bring in the piecemeal and start working on that.
And when you do those demos, do you actually do mock-ups of the other parts the session musicians will play?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we can do it on a drum machine to get a drum part down, it may be basic because we don't want to. I think there's a great power in giving direction without telling somebody what to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because you would hire a great drummer to have them take the interpretation of what.
Just use it as a rough guideline, and then they can.
This is the vibe, but we want you to do your thing. Right. That's why you hire those guys. But it gives a placeholder, a template. Not to say that template holds water. It does in the demo stage or as a guide, but it's not to but if somebody says, I want to change the groove. And if that groove can change and work with everything else, great. Yeah. Fantastic. So we do try and do mock-ups so that we can give somebody something to listen to, because we want to send them a rough mix and say, this is what we're working on. Here's a real scratch bass part or a scratch drum part. What can you add to it? What do you think? It's in this key, this tempo, these are the changes. That kind of thing.
I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide detailing my techniques for recording huge snare sounds. Check it out now at brandondecora.com/huge snare. And now back to the show. So when you're working, you've had the luxury of working with artists where they're actually writing in the studio.
Yeah.
not everyone can do that. It's obviously it gets very expensive.
It's a different day these days.
Yes, but at the same time, there's a lot of people with home setups that are pretty good, and they can do a lot with their own stuff at home and make great sounds and get inspired in that way.
Very much so.
How would you like? I've even been hired, by some people that wanted me in the studio for the writing phase, strictly because of that, because I can help get a great sound right when they're writing, and so that inspires everything else.
Sure.
How would you say it varies, when you're at home doing something and you have the knowledge to work it up versus in the studio with, even better sounds, and, how would you look at those differences?
Well, I think I also kind of have that idea that, and this is a little bit of a slippery slope, whereas the demo can be the finished product.
Yeah.
And we have the technology now to do that. And there are some really fantastic, they're studios in people's homes. They're legit.
I mean, look at this place.
They're legit, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of the demo stage is just it could be the finished thing on the radio,
right,
if it has what it's done, if it has what it takes, But I'm also of a person that I like more. I'm more of inclined. My natural instincts are go with emotion over sonics.
Right.
I love sonics. I love great sounding records, great sounding performances, and I'm happy to go to someone's house and help them dial in something and let them work on their own at their leisure, if it's 4 a.m. or 2 in the afternoon. Because that's how great things are written. That's how, great things are made, with whether it's an artist on their own or whether it's a team of people. But, it's a little tricky. Because I'm a fan of great performances. I'm a fan of great material. And I feel like when people are relaxed and they are comfortable, they usually kind of forget the process.
Right.
It just kind of comes out of them.
That actually ties into another thing that I've known for a long time, or that I learned a long time ago, is that, when you're recording like a scratch vocal, for example, I always do everything I can to make it possible to use that as the final. And because when people are not thinking that the red light's on, it's just a throwaway, whatever, just have fun, it doesn't matter, that's when you get the best performances. And that ties into using the demo as the final as well, because it's the same
100%.
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot. More than we probably realize.
Right.
It just so happens now that, and nothing wrong with a Tascam Porta Studio 2 cassette 4-track.
That's what I started on.
I still have it. It's upstairs. And it's, great sounding, but nothing against those. It's not about the recording. It's the performance.
Of course.
And we have such, and also like shout out to like the new equipment makers today, like microphones, preamps, equalizers, pedals.
Yeah.
The technology that's available now is crazy. It's really, really good. People are paying attention. They care about sound. They care about quality. And for minimal expense, if you really look at it, you know. So your demos, for lack of a better term, really are as quality as a finished product on any studio level, if you know what to do and how to do it. And not to say that there's a right way and a wrong way to record or make a record, because there's not. But if you know how to get good, clean signal on whatever it is and just record it and not over manipulate it without it being a problem later on down the line, the demo is the finished thing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I like to finish up each episode with kind of the same set of questions.
Sure.
The first question I have is, what has been your most influential teacher?
Okay. Let's see what, not who.
Well, who? I guess either one.
I'm teasing.
You're right.
That's a good one. There have been some phenomenal mentors in my path that I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. But I don't want to be the name drop guy. But I think watching and learning from a lot of these people, being in the room with them, learning how to facilitate smoothly, efficiently, aside from learning signal path and equipment,
Right.
there have been some really fantastic teachers, and they run the gamut. But I would definitely say Rick has been a big one for obvious reasons. And I've been around for a minute now to see the different genres and processes. The process is always a little bit of the same, but it's always different with personalities and how you manage those and how you manage the material. And the team, has been pretty amazing. And Dan, for being a mentor and a person I still keep up with and calls, and we have long conversations about production technique and songs and music. Greg Fiddleman, I worked under him for a long time, most of which were Rick-based projects. Andrew Sheps, another one. I worked at a lot of projects with him under Rick. Dave Schiffman, another one as well.
Cool.
Joe Barisi, another guy, not part of the Rick camp, but I met him at Sound City, and we have a long friendship and mentorship as well. But these are people that taught me really how to make some really incredible sounding records at a high level, and it's been massive impact. I wouldn't be anywhere without them.
Of course. Nice. Cool. The next question I have is, what is your favorite reference track when you're walking into a new studio? You need to learn what the room sounds like. Whatever.
Oh, right. Okay, let's see. I have a playlist. I don't have one. I have several. It also depends on the material, what we're going to be working on.
Of course.
Like I said, big rock track is not going to work for a big ballad vocal.
Yeah.
But it is helpful to hear the room and kind of hear how the frequencies are going to respond. But I listen to a slew of things. I have a playlist on Spotify. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I have like Kendrick Lamar, which I love.
Nice.
Muse.
Nice.
Undisclosed Desires is one of my favorites. It's a Spike Stent. He produced and mixed it.
Nice.
I mean, it jumps out of the speakers. Tom Petty. A lot of it's stuff that I've worked on too. Chili Peppers.
Okay.
System of a Down. And then what else? It also it just sort of depends if I'm working with an artist and we have a lot of reference tracks, or they have a lot of reference tracks that they're referring to, then I might also put one or two of those on as well. After I get an idea of what the room sounds like, where the best not listening position, but I'll have an idea of
how things
scope
are responding.
How they're responding. Cool. And then we'll start listening to kind of references, if not even, maybe some of the demos in the room, just to kind of hear how it's going to affect, come out.
Nice.
So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Last question.
Do you have a reference track?
I do.
Or several? Well, maybe you have a playlist?
Honestly, I don't have a playlist. A lot of the guys I've been talking to do have playlists, so it's making me think that I need to start
they
one.
do? Okay, so I'm not alone.
You're not alone. But the main thing that I listen to is an Australian band named Carnival. Oh. And they have a song called New Day, and it has a lot of ups and downs, like a really big heavy chorus and like really mellow verses and stuff like that. So,
Carnival with a C or with a K?
With a K.
Oh, it's almost like really Emerson,
funny.
Lake and Palmer.
Yeah, it's Karnivool. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're like a kind of a prog rock band, and they've been around for a while, and it's just I'm super familiar with it. So
Carnival, what else do you have?
That's the main thing, honestly. I have if I need to check out the low end of the room, I'll put on a group called Fat Freddy's Drop. And it's just like kind of like R&B, like sort of reggae-esque.
Okay.
Just a lot of low end on the subs and everything. So
I don't know either of those two artists. Are they American or Australian as well?
I honestly don't know where they're from. I think they're American.
Okay.
They're American, yeah.
Fat Freddy's Drop?
Yeah.
Nice. Sounds like a big,
cool.
massive drop.
It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing. You know, there's a few others, and obviously the same thing if it's working on a project where there's references for the track or anything.
Sure.
Mixing, I'm always listening to what the client's references are and, you know, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you do pre-production?
I mostly do mixing at this point.
Okay.
I've done a handful of projects that I've produced, but I don't really consider myself a producer just because I've worked with enough amazing producers that I leave that to them, basically.
Oh. Right.
Like, obviously, I'll, you know, suggest, like, hey, we should try and double this guitar or whatever, you know, little things like that. But the broader, you know, aspect of producing is I leave to people that are better than me.
I see.
So I would rather engineer and mix, and I'm doing mostly mixing now.
Is that right?
So, yeah.
Are you working in the box? Or you have outboard gear and
I have
chains?
a bit of both. It's mostly in the box, but I have a summing bus that I use for extra saturation and everything. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's cool. Yeah, it's fun.
You have something you can, can you talk about what you're working on or what you have coming up?
I've been working on a lot of smaller projects. There's a couple films that I've done recently that are in the works. I actually did a couple days working on the new Willy Wonka movie.
Really?
Of all things.
How cool.
Kind of random. But I've been, you know, I mix mostly rock tracks, and it's a lot of indie projects and a lot of smaller bands, but you know, I've been really busy doing that. So,
cool.
Yeah. Last question. What is one tidbit for an upcoming engineer?
One tidbit for an upcoming engineer. There's a lot of them because it's changed. The business has changed, I think, so much. But I think for the longest time, I think we can teach anyone signal flow and equipment and how to compress and delay times and all of that. But I think if you're going to go down the route of like going into the big studio route of working in a big studio to work on records, that doesn't even mean major label anymore. But to work on records at a studio as opposed to a private studio, but also it can cross over into the private studio. I think it's about personality. Yeah. I think it's about knowing when to speak and knowing when not to speak.
Right.
And kind of, I don't want to say invisible because that was what was kind of stressed to me coming up, but your presence kind of needs to be felt and not seen or heard.
Right.
Because you're there to do a job and there's a creative team that are there to help. But it's learning how to read a room.
Right.
And learning how to look busy and stay busy and be a part of the team without, telling everybody that you're a part of the team, without being obvious being part of the team. It's a slippery slope on drawing attention to yourself or not, and at the right time. And I don't even want to say, but like being cool, but how to be cool. You got to have a personality for it because it's long hours. You're working with the same people in a small room, usually for at least 12 hours a day, sometimes more if you're there early and late because you're backing up or syncing up drives or something. But it's about longevity and having a cool personality that is easygoing, mild-mannered, and willingness to learn too.
Right.
If you don't have that hunger and you don't have the proper personality, it's going to be a difficult road.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I've seen a lot of people not make it.
Mhm.
Not even say not make it. They've changed their minds because
Yes.
things were becoming more difficult for them.
Yes.
And they had decided, I'm not going to pursue this anymore and I'm going to go and do
Right.
something else,
Right.
which is all fine and good. But I think it's about personality and learning how to read a room.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
At
man.
least it was for me, anyhow.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to, stress also the eagerness to learn too. I've been, engineering in plenty of studios where the assistant is, on the phone in their corner and not even caring about what's going on in the room. It's like, it makes me not even want to help the guy. It's like,
Right.
if you don't want to be here, then why do I care to help you out?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a big part of it.
Very much so, man. Yeah, you can't teach that.
Mm-hmm.
People are really intelligent. We're intelligent beings. We pick up on one another. We read each other's cues visually,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. But if someone doesn't want to learn with the people in the room that they're working on, and obviously I'm talking about a major studio situation.
Yeah.
But if you have a person that's working there that wants to be a part of it, but is not picking up on the cues,
Mm-hmm.
you can maybe pull that person aside and say,
Right.
okay, look, let's maybe readdress our approach on how this is going to go down. And some people can take to that. They can
Mhm.
take direction well or
Right.
criticism
Yeah.
in that regard, or they don't.
Mhm.
And it's going to show its face
Right.
whether it works or not later
Right.
on.
Right.
Like you can lead the camel to water. You just can't make them drink.
Of course. Of course.
How cliche.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
But yeah, that's my
Awesome.
philosophy on,
Awesome.
on newcomers. I
Awesome.
hope it helps. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Really
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. As you know, I'm just getting this started, and I'd love your feedback on how I'm doing, if I should keep this going, what your thoughts are. Feel free to visit proaudioprofiles.com and send me a message. Until next time.